Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. IRS tax relief now available to ETA victims in New York and New Jersey. October 15th deadline. Other dates extended to January 3rd. Washington. Victims of Hurricane Eta in parts of New York and New Jersey now have until January 3rd, 2022 to file various individual and business tax returns and make tax payments, the Internal Revenue Service announced today. This is comparable to relief provided last week to Eta victims in Louisiana. There's a link to the Louisiana post here as well, so they're basically extending the same kind of relief, it looks like, extending out as needed. So the IRS is offering a relief to any area designated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. That's FEMA, FEMA. There's a link to FEMA here, as qualifying for individual or public assistance. In New York, this currently includes, and I might mispronounce some of these, so I apologize if I do, but we will have a link to this so you can take a look at them yourself to see if you're on the list here. So remember, the general idea being that the IRS will kind of designate these areas with FEMA, and FEMA will designate them. You can then look them up here, and if they're in that designation, you shouldn't have to do anything because the IRS will basically extend the deadlines and so on and so forth based on that locality, unless you're in some special conditions, which we'll talk about shortly. So we have Bronx, Kings, New York, Queens, Richmond, Westchester counties, and in New Jersey, it includes Bergen, Gloucester, Hunterdon, Middlesex, Passaic, and Somerset counties. Taxpayers in ETA-impacted localities subsequently designated by FEMA in other parts of these states will automatically receive the same filing and payment relief. The current list of eligible locations is always available on the disaster relief page on IRS.gov. So there's a link to that disaster relief page. So as things are updated later, they might expand it. And so you can take a look at it. And if you couldn't hear or I pronounced anything wrong, you can take a look at it and see if you are on there as well, or if anybody you know might be wanting or necessitating this information. So, quote, during this difficult time, the IRS stands ready to help victims of Hurricane Eta, end quote, said IRS Commissioner Chuck Reddick. Quote, we want people affected by this devastating hurricane focused on their safety and recovery for themselves and their families to provide assistance now and in the weeks ahead. We have a variety of different types of relief available to help people and businesses affected by this disaster, end quote. The IRS relief postpones various tax filing and payment deadlines that occurred starting on September 1st, 2021. As a result, affected individuals and businesses will have until January 3rd, 2022 to file returns and pay any taxes that were originally due during this period. This means individuals who had a valid extension to file their 2020 return due to run out on October 15th, 2021 will now have until January 3rd, 2022 to file. The IRS noted, however, that because tax payments related to these 2020 returns were due on May 17, 2021, those payments are not eligible for this relief. So same kind of setup they had before. They're extending the deadlines. The October 15th individual filing deadline may have been a deadline that you're shooting for after having filed an extension. Remember that this year's been a little bit funny in that in 2020, they extended the original filing deadline from April 15th on out. However, if you filed an extension, they haven't extended the due date for the extension time period. It would normally be October 15th, and that's the one now that if you're in this area and you're on extension, you might have that as part of one of the items that could be extended. Remembering, however, there's a difference between the filing requirements and the payment requirements, because the payment requirements were still due before the extension was extended. You don't have the same kind of extension for the payment requirements due to that consideration. So just remember, same kind of situation. You're supposed to make the payment at the point in time you make the extension, even if you don't know how much tax you're owing or anything, because you haven't actually done the tax return. But that's the way it's set up. You got to keep those two things separate. Okay. So the January 3rd, 2022 deadline also applies to quarterly estimated income tax payments due on September 15, 2021, and the quarterly and excise tax returns normally due on November 1st, 2021. It also applies to tax-exempt organizations operating on a calendar year basis that had a valid extension due to run out on November 15th, 2021. Businesses with an original or extended due date also have the additional time, including, among others, calendar year partnerships and S corporations whose 2020 extension run out on September 15th, 2021, and calendar year corporations whose 2020 extensions run out on October 15th, 2021. In addition, penalties on payroll and excise tax deposits due on or after September 1st and before September 16th will be abated as long as the deposits are made by September 16th, 2021. The IRS Disaster Relief page, there's a link to that page here, has details on all other returns, payments, and tax-related actions qualifying for the additional time. The IRS automatically provides filing and penalty relief to any taxpayer with an IRS address of record located in the disaster area. Therefore, taxpayers do not need to contact the agency to get this relief. So it should be basically the idea FEMA designates it, they provide the relief by location. Therefore, you shouldn't have to do anything in most circumstances. However, if an affected taxpayer receives a late filing or late payment penalty notice from the IRS that has an original or extended filing, payment, or deposit due date falling within the postponement period, the taxpayer should call the number on the notice to have the penalty abated. So if the IRS, in essence, messes up here, you're in the designated zone, they penalize you or something like that, even though you're in the area where you should have this extension, you should give a phone number on the letter. You should be able to call them and hopefully get the penalty abated, which means removed. In addition, the IRS will work with any taxpayer who lives outside the disaster area but whose records necessarily to meet a deadline occurring during the postponement payment period are located in the affected area. So in that case, you would need to actually do something because you're saying we're not actually in the designated area. Therefore, you're not going to apply the relief to you automatically because that's not where your address is. However, the place where your records are kept, possibly being inside the designated area, keeping you from doing whatever it is you need to do, then you might have to take some action given the fact that the IRS would not have automatically applied to you the relief, but it may then apply to you if action was taken. So taxpayers qualifying for relief who live outside the disaster area need to contact the IRS at 866-562-5227, 866-562-5227. This also includes assisting the relief activities and are affiliated with a recognized government or philanthropic organization. Individuals and businesses in a federally declared disaster area who suffer uninsured or unreimbursed disaster-related losses can choose to claim them on either the return for the year the loss occurred, in this instance the 2021 return normally filed next year, or the return for the prior year 2020. And so if you're in that designated area, they give you that kind of option. Now, obviously, the thing happened to now in 2021, so a couple things to just consider on that. If it happened in 2021, normally you would think you would file it in 2021, but then you wouldn't get the relief basically until you file the tax return, which would be by April 15th of 2022, or possibly you could file the tax return and get the relief if you file it for 2020, which may allow you to get the benefit from it earlier. A couple other things just to consider what's going to be the tax implications of if you have this loss on there. One, you may have already filed 2020, so do you have to amend the tax return? You may need to amend. If you chose to adjust to 2020, possibly you might have that possibility. And also you want to think about your income level. If you're in a disaster area, it's quite possible your income would be affected and you might have lower income in 2021. So this is really a weird time these days because 2020 might have been low because of COVID in terms of income. And then 2021 might be low because of that and the hurricane, so the question then is, you'd probably get the best benefit if you can take the deduction in the year where your income would be higher, because normally it might be, well, in any case, it'd usually be when your income was higher. So your question might be, which year's my income going to be higher in order to get the biggest tax benefit from it? So couple things to think about there. So be sure to write the FEMA, F-E-M-A, declaration number 4614 for New Jersey and 4615 for New York, or on any return claiming a loss. See publication 547 for details. There's a link to that publication here. The tax relief is part of a coordinated federal response to the damage caused by Hurricane Ida and is based on local damages assessments by FEMA. For information on disaster recovery, you can visit disasterassistance.gov. There's a link to disasterresistance.gov. There's links to all this other information, including the FEMA disaster area, so you can see if you're within it automatically. And there'll be a link to this in the description.